Mankind has always pursued beauty, and beautiful art and decorations are created by the hands of skilled folk artists. In the ancient capital of Beijing, ordinary people are pursuing beauty in their own ways. With their skilled hands, they're prospering and they're creating a glorious future, but also creating wonderful exemplars of their craftsmanship.
Sure.
75-year-old Wang Guanqin is continuing the tradition of making embroidered shoes. Her latest project is a pair of nashi two-tone embroidered shoes.
就是那纳西做的嘛。这个鞋嘛，双色鞋一般来说布鞋很少有。我们利用面料的不同颜色，搭配出双色来，再选花绣上，就跟它这个就风格完全不一样。
There are 17 to 18 steps to making a pair of 100% handmade embroidered shoes, and it's a process that requires wisdom and patience. The first auction of intangible cultural heritage in Beijing was held in 2011. 2 pairs of embroidered shoes with a phoenix theme were both sold at their starting price of 40,000 yuan. Both pairs were made by Wang Guanqin. Wang inherited the skill from her maternal grandmother when she began learning from her at the age of just 5. She was a diligent student. After she retired, she began researching ways to make embroidered shoes. The most obvious trait of embroidered shoes is the embroidered pattern, so designing the pattern is the first step. The beauty of the shoes is mostly determined by the colour and design of the embroidery. Wang Guanqin invests a lot of time and effort in designing the patterns for her embroidered shoes.
要不为什么在构思过程当中，常常把生活都闹颠倒了？刷完了牙又跑到那个卫生间去刷去了。 老伴儿问我，你不刚刷完了，你怎么又进去刷牙去了？忘了，因为脑子想的全是鞋。
She is using pictures as reference this time, so things seem to be going well today. She's been working all day on an exquisite design for the two-tone shoes.
从构思到出来，不是修改多少遍，出来起码半天的时间。
As soon as designed, Wang begins making the nashi two-tone embroidered shoes. To make the soles of the shoes, layer after layer of cloth is glued onto the table. It's an essential step for making traditional cloth shoes. The sole usually has 6 layers of cloth. The quality of the soles is a factor in how comfortable the shoes will be. Wang Guanqin always leaves this step to her armour, Mrs.
不让它重叠。 是别齐了，原来你得对齐了。
2 years ago, Wang Guanqin's husband suddenly passed away. Her 2 sons don't live near her, so she has an armour, who naturally also became her assistant. A finished sole needs to be dried in the sun for a few days before it can be used in a shoe. Cai Zhiwei goes to the Changping district of Beijing every weekend to visit his parents. This time, he has an urgent matter to discuss with them. Cai Zhiwei's hobby is making silk bird replicas. A couple of weeks ago, he accepted an invitation for the Beijing Intangible Heritage Exhibition Tour to London. With only a week to go, he still hasn't started on the bird he wants to bring. Copper wire is used to make the framework, which is then covered in silk to form flowers, birds, fish and insects. Older Beijing residents still remember when such decorations were essential in the home. But times have changed, and today they're not so popular. Cai Jiwei is now one of the few artists in Beijing who's in this traditional handicraft. His exquisite pieces include Flowers Bring Great Fortune, Beautiful Beijing, and Magpie on a Plum Tree Branch. He has mainly come home to dye some silk. Dyed silk is the most important material for making this traditional silk art. The raw silk is first put in water and kneaded until it is completely soaked. Cai Jiwei doesn't dye the silk straight away after washing. Instead, he brings out a pot. Raw silk contains a chemical that makes it resist dye, so it's essential to boil it to get rid of the chemical. Cai strictly follows the traditional procedure at every step. After gently boiling the silk for about 10 minutes, it becomes smooth and soft. Cai decides to start dyeing the silk immediately after boiling it. Dyeing silk requires great skill. Cai uses mineral pigments, and he depends on his experience in choosing the pigments and controlling the shade. Today he's dyeing the silk bright red. It takes him a few attempts to get the colour right. After soaking the cloth in the dye, the water must be quickly squeezed out of the silk to make sure the colour is even. And this takes some effort. After as much water is squeezed out of the silk as possible, it is dried in the sun. At 5 a.m, Wang Guanqing leaves for her workshop near her home. Her husband's sudden death gives her a sense of urgency. In 2011, Wang Guanqing opened a workshop called the Embroidered Shoes Shop. She hopes to pass on her knowledge about embroidered shoes to the next generation.
昨天他们在绣制的过程当中，可以看得出来他们的心是不踏实。
The first thing Wang does when she arrives is to see how much progress the students have made. She's been focusing lately on R&D rather than sales. She spent her entire savings of several $100,000 yuan. The lease on her shop is about to expire, and she may have to close it. So she has spent almost all her time making shoes to increase output. The uppers of Nashi two-tone shoes are made of 2 colours of cloth. Picking the right colour combination is critical.
这两个颜色做出了可能是一个风格，这两个颜色又是一个风格。
Picking the right colours is painstaking work. Even for a master like Wang Guanqing, this always presents a challenge.
所以就是犹豫不定。到底是这两个的风格还是这两个的风格好？先做一双看看。
After picking the cloth, the next step is to make the uppers. The soles are cut to determine the shoe size. The uppers are then attached to the soles.
差一点儿不行。
First, the base colour cloth is glued in place and the other colour cloth is then stitched to it. It sounds simple, but it usually takes a whole day to complete a pair.
这是关键的部位。
After years of hard work, her health prevents Wang Guanqin from working long hours. She's been teaching her students how to make the shoe so that they can be up to speed as soon as possible.
可能这个往上窝，这就是设计好的纹样，荷花的叶，应该往斜上画的时候。
Zhang Zhiru has been studying under Wang Guanqin for 5 or 6 years. Wang has decided to let her finish this pair of two-tone shoes on her own.
对称一点，对吧？这个是。
通过扎以后，然后再刷的时候，这个粉才能通过漏粉漏到这个鞋的这个上面来。这种的呢，就是要比手工画的更准确。
After piercing the holes and brushing with powder, Zhang Zhiru is ready for the most important step, embroidering the pattern. Regular embroidering is done on thin silk cloth. But for shoes, it's on the thick upper, so it's more difficult. It will take 3 to 5 months just to embroider on the 2 masterpieces of her shoe shop.
因为这个纹样是我第一次绣，大概其也得10来天才能绣完。
With just 4 days left before departure, Tai Jiwei is a little worried that he hasn't received any significant news. So this afternoon he's come for information. The 100 Folk Artists Workshop is both a dynamic folk art museum and an important Beijing gathering place for folk artists. Several of them that are going to Lhasa with Tai Jiwei are here now.
溜溜呗，没嘛了，看看你。来一个。我怎么到现在没有信儿呢？应该是那个11号走吧，差不多。是啊，
是11号走。
我们百工坊那是积极性都挺高的。
Tai Jiwei asks around and finds that everyone seems to be prepared. He still hasn't made anything yet, but he doesn't seem worried. On Saturday, 2 days before departure, he gets to work.
用这一等子把这绒撑一下。为什么要撑它呢？就绒呢是多少决定于一个这活的美观度。需要多少号的铜丝，大约需要多大尺寸的，需要多少绒，这是有规律性的。来，蔡新宇，过来帮个忙。
Tai Jiwei's daughter is 14 years old. She's more into celebrity gossip and entertainment programs than her father's hobby. But when her father asks her for help, she agrees.
蔡新宇，过来帮个忙来。你拿手去捋，我有时候注意点，别把手给拉着。你拿这个。
Combing the silk is just like combing hair.
人的头发是不梳透了，也不好看，而且呢，它到时候用的时候也不好用了。
Then they need to tie, cut and rub the silk. There are over 10 steps required, but the tying, cutting and rubbing are the most difficult.
这套步骤的话，其实说学会很容易，可能有个那么几天就能学会。但是如果练熟了、练好了的话，得需要个将近几个月到1年的时间吧。这是头发上有油嘛，站在剪子上，然后绞的时候好顺畅一点。
With over a decade of experience, Tai Jiwei has become very adept with his hands. He is fast and precise at every step. The purpose of tying, cutting and rubbing the silk is to make strips that form the backbone. Several years ago, Tai Jiwei and Mr. Zhao Shuxian from Nanjing prepared over 10,000 silk strips in 3 days and worked around the clock to make a gown for actress Yao Xingtong. On the red carpet at the Cannes Film Festival in France, she looked stunning. Tai has worked all morning to prepare a box of silk strips, but now he's not sure what he wants to make with them.
就是没想好具体做一什么花儿，反正都是红绒条。做头花吧，偏小一点，展现形式没那么明显。
我因为这个房子到期已经赖着人家好几个月了，对吧？
The lease will soon expire. If Wang Guangqin can't get any help, her embroidered shoe shop might have to close. This is the last thing she wants to see.
问题就是说能不能解决？每个月我现在是举债在坚持着呢。
Wang Guangqin has called a few organizations that once promised to support her, but she hasn't received any response, making her a little upset.
这个打不通，所以我就说这个绣花鞋这个技艺是濒临绝迹，非常非常的需要跟上的，后人需要跟上的。但是现实情况就是这样，年轻人做不下来。要是说真正的培养出一个人来，那就是说得需要下功夫。
王老师，绣完了。
It has taken almost 2 weeks to finish embroidering the two-tone shoes. The final step is to close up the shoe's uppers and stitch the sole to the upper.
完成了，我把它合到一起了。实际我现在在做什么？说起来好像不好听，我都是在做后事。最后边的事情，谁在做的，我心里头都有在规划着怎么安排。一旦我什么了，免得大家都措手不及，我得有一个交代。
Stitching the sole to the upper calls for patience and care. The number of stitches is very precise. Wang leaves this job to her ama, Mrs. San. To do this task, she uses the traditional stitching method. The needle goes from inside to outside, so the stitching doesn't show on the outside of the shoe. This ensures the shoes look nice and the shoe upper stays strong and stiff. After 2 days of stitching, Mrs. San is almost finished stitching the soles.
人我做好了，你瞧瞧，
把这都弄了，
都弄了。
Now is the final shaping, and this pair of Nashi-style two-tone embroidered shoes will finally be finished. They took several people working nearly a month to make.
鞋底啊。
This might be the last pair of shoes Wang makes in her workshop.
把那个新做的这个先拿出来，咱们看看。
That afternoon, the two-tone shoes are officially put on display. Wang Guangqin and her students are making some adjustments to the display of the exhibition hall.
把这个云头珠轮，这个颜色的换一换。
Once again, immersed in the world of embroidered shoes, Wang tells her students how to change the display and gives everyone some background information on these embroidered shoes.
这衣服是购物鞋，这购物鞋就是当时一种姑娘。
Every pair of embroidered shoes reflects Wang Guangqin's painstaking efforts. The styles of the shoes emulate styles once popular in many different eras.
完了，最后给我们这个师徒一块儿合照一个，万一散了呢？
好，大家表情都太严肃了。好，稍微放开一点哈。好，1、2、3。
On Sunday, the day before departure, Tai Jiwei has decided which example of his work to bring. After shaping the silk strips, they are like puzzle pieces. In Tai's hands, they can be turned into a flower in just a few minutes.
中式服装做绒花的最合适的，朋友结婚我从来都是让他们带着，没有一个说不好的。
While Tai Jiwei is busy making the silk flowers, his wife is in the kitchen making a delicious meal.
我们有一个厂子原来做建材的，然后后来之后他做了这个之后，建材也不做了，等于一心就做这个。
After finishing some flowers, Tai takes a short break.
原材料给力。
再做一个福州烟尖6朵花就行。
After the break, Tai continues working on the last flower.
我们这跟的就是一个玩儿，一个喜欢，真跟的不挣钱这东西。
It has taken Tai all morning to complete a group of traditional silk flowers in old traditional Beijing style.
这个是不同用途的，你看这是第一朵花，这是结婚用的百合。
The silk flowers need to look real. Every flower has a story behind it. This group is a true representative of old Beijing and is also the most traditional.
这个北京的花儿主要是以红色调为主，所以说这个戴在头上呢，特显得肉头喜庆。北京话叫肉头，就是红红乎乎的，哎，还特别喜庆，就戴上以后。
吃饭喽，我开饭喽。
The group of silk flowers is finished and the food is ready. Tai Jiwei's family sits around the table to enjoy some family time together.
我想带这几种最传统的花儿，就是给西藏做一个展示嘛。这是老北京的最传统的几种花儿。
Not long after completing the two-tone embroidered shoes, Wang had to close her shop. But she's not discouraged. She still makes embroidered shoes and tries to pass her skills on to the next generation. For Tai Jiwei, the tour in Tibet is only the beginning. He plans to spend a few years making some large-scale pieces and work with Mr. Zhao Shuxian from Nanjing to stage an exhibition featuring both northern and southern styles. Dexterous hands are restoring and preserving the beauty of the past. Folk artists are working hard to ensure the survival of handicraft skills. Thanks to the persistence of these artists, in Beijing, folk arts and handicrafts are thriving. The city of Beijing is a place where Chinese and Western cultures meet. As culture from the East has affected Western culture over the last century, imports coming here from the West have changed in wondrous ways. Tiny snuff bottles and kaleidoscopes are being made by the folk artists of old Beijing.